mostly while reading code, yeah, at least me, I never understand it during the first pass. It's a whole mystery. I can't even be sure that I actually understood a piece of code until I have made a change to it. Interesting. Let's get back to diff. We were getting a hang of it. For performing the lifecycle methods, at least, I see all the references here, and the render callbacks are set here, the components are created here. Uh, so it seems like an important function. So now we finished creating the component. So what I will do is I'll yeah, so what I'll do, so I will take this whole part and I will move it downstairs to create component and put this whole thing here and just shorten this to create component, right, so that we can stop thinking about it. But this seems to be getting more and more relevant. So what I'll do is I'll just pop it in here because we seem to be adding more and more stuff into this, right? And it's something that we'll keep track of. Okay, one thing that I have not looked into, I thought these functions would have tests for them, diff test or whatever. Are they here? Performance test, browser test, render test. The actual implementation does not have tests, I think. There are some tests. Is valid element or not, stuff like that. I think there is room to write tests for these methods. Here I try to understand more about how to create the component and how preact invokes the lifecycle hooks. But it was a pretty frustrating exercise, as in I could not understand the relationship between many of these parameters, and the component object kept growing, and there were quite a lot of conditions around each of the function executions. So it was pretty confusing at this point, though I have to say that it did improve my familiarity with the code base. But I cut out most of this part as I felt it was not useful. The little rants I had in between about the problems I was facing or about the little understandings I found, I have included in this video. See, all of these things deserve like their own explanations. I feel sometimes, like the whole context part, the dirty boolean part, how state is handled, how render callbacks is handled. It's written here all together, but we, in our mind, we have to keep these as separate kind of entities that are changing throughout the code and performing certain things as they change, affecting certain side effects as they change. Here too, I was pretty much lost. I did not at all understand what that function that I highlighted did, and as you can see, I spent most of the time here in silence, just staring at this code. I got this part. This part is fast forwarded around 8x. Because I spent a huge amount of time trying to understand the logic around should component update, and I only got it kind of in the next session. I also tried to debug the code and see what inputs the functions were getting, what the shape of the objects look like, because all of this code did not contain any types. I was somewhat successful, as you will see in the uh, further down the video. So until here, what has happened is we've built up the commit queue and we have gone through the whole React tree. We have gone through in a depth first manner, right? So we get this parent, then we find all its children, then we find that first child, which is what happens inside diff children. We find that first child, and then we call the diff method again, which finds all the children of that and the first child of that, and so on. So we're going depth first each time. So until we finish it with the last element node, then we return back and it progresses to the next child and so on. To recap, let's just write some pseudocode to figure out what happens after this. So in the diff function, first we saw that if it is not a valid element, then we bail. If an external diff function is used, then we use that. If it's a function component, we if it's a function, yeah, I think this is what I think I got this difference wrong. So if it's a virtual component, I'll call it a virtual component. I don't know what to call it. Like I want to differentiate between nodes that have children and leaf nodes. So yeah, if a component has children, I guess. I'm assuming this is what they're trying to get at. Else if component is leaf node. So if this, then we initialize the provider. This has been a little bit of a mystery for me because I did not understand how the create context flow works yet. Regardless, our variable C is the actual component that we're going to use throughout this function. We use that, we kind of create that at the beginning, and I think it kind of ends here, and we mark the dirty as true. Render, so it has a constructor which will have the type of component, that is, it has a render function, it has prop, state, and context. It has some more meta, which again has context, dirty, next state, whether it's forced or not, and things like that. Yeah. So after this, after create component, what happens is if so handle get derived state from props, which makes sense. This should happen at the beginning of the component, and if yeah, it should happen at the beginning of the component. So, and we call that. So then there is again a split where first render, then we do a bunch of stuff. If it's the first render, then we call component will mount. Then we so now what we do is we do render callbacks dot push component did mount. The idea of render callbacks array is to be an array of all the lifecycle components that need to be called in that particular order. So since this is all before render, we kind of push it to the render callbacks. Then we else if re-render. the condition here is if it is re-rendered, we will call component will receive props. After checking if props changed, if props changed, then we'll do a component will receive props. Else, so then we do all the logic for should component update. If true, then bail. If should component update is false, then bail. Else continue. So while bailing, we want to do a bunch of stuff. While bailing, we want to run render callbacks that we have created. The all render callbacks, we want to run them. So we run them basically by putting that component in the commit queue. So push to commit queue. So here if it has not bailed, then we will call component will update and push to render callbacks. Component did update, which should happen after the update, right? Now we render the component. So before rendering, we mark dirty equals false. We had marked dirty equals true here. Yeah, I honestly don't know the significance of the dirty boolean, and I hope I'll get to know in the future. Okay, next after render, we do again context related stuff, which I'm not quite sure. Then see, the render function gets called first, but the actual render has not happened, so we can still get the snapshot before update here, before the actual update happens, which I think is here. And then it goes through all the children, sends it similar properties as we saw it being sent from previous this thing. Mainly we want so the current commit queue is sent to it, which has the current render callbacks, and then so as it progresses through the children, it will get more render callbacks inside it. And parameters such as eSide rating, which are important, passing on the parent context. Next we push in the component to the commit queue. Okay, so we want so if you're doing depth first, we want all the children components in the commit queue, and then we want to put the parent component in, right? So we do it here, and that's it. That's the diff function. Thanks so much for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed it. This video should give you a good idea about the frustration and the time-consuming nature of reading a brand new code base. I really struggled to understand the diff function, but I think I have a very good idea about it now. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts about the video, and also like and subscribe.